Good morning everyone and welcome to the Flood Action Conference 2023 here in St Ives. It's really great to see so many people and it does feel particularly apt after the weather we had yesterday. I don't know if many of you had constant rainfall all day. Just on my own weather station we had 35 mil of rain in 24 hours, which is about 3/4 of what we'd expect for the whole of September. So it really was quite impressive yesterday. And I think it just goes to show how much the weather is changing compared to the historic trends and demonstrates why we're all here today and why flooding is so important. Thank you. So on to this year's conference. I'd thank you all for coming along again. Last year was the first time that we'd had anything like this. And as you can see from the photographs of last year, we've somewhat grown in size. I think last year we had just over 50 attendees. And whilst I don't know the exact figures from today, at my last check we did have around 200 signed up at some point today, which is really great. First and foremost, I would just like to thank Tia and my team, because without her today, the event definitely wouldn't have happened. She spent the last few months planning the venue, the speakers, the comms, the logistics, the promotional materials and everything, and ensures today's run smoothly. So if we could just have a big round of applause for Tia for making this happen. So this conference is part of the Council's Community Flood Action Programme, which has been running now since 2021. The aim of the programme is to raise community awareness of flooding and to help increase the resilience and look at ways that we can all work better together to help improve our county's resilience. I think the COVID pandemic taught us just how important community resilience is, and it did really demonstrate how people can come together at times of difficulty to work with each other. The aim of today is to learn more about flooding and what can be done to increase resilience and learn how we can work better together as community groups. So of equal importance to learning about how communities can work together is learning about what, as a council, we can do to help you when it comes to flooding. So in most councils, there are various different departments with flooding functions, but the three key ones we have are the lead local flood authority, the highway authority and the emergency planning team. Where these sit within individual councils can vary slightly, but they do all ultimately exist in some form. So the lead local flood authority, or the LLFA, is a team that was formed back in 2010 following the introduction of the Flood and Water Management Act 2010. This placed certain powers and duties on councils, including those listed on the screen, and I'll just run through those briefly now. So firstly, we issue something called a land drainage consent. So a land drainage consent is required for any works to what is called an ordinary watercourse. And there is guidance in each of the bags on your chairs which explains the difference between the different types of watercourse. But they tend to be the smaller ditches and streams, ones that run through fields, to the side of properties and that kind of thing. But they're the ones that are not managed by the Environment Agency. But these consent applications are assessed by us at the council to ensure that any of the works that are proposed aren't going to increase the risk of flooding to surrounding properties. An LLFA must also develop and implement a strategy for how they're going to manage the risk of flooding across their area into the future. These strategies often contain an action plan which shows what is going to be done by which organisation, and it should be available to view on each council's website. And as most of you know, we're in an area of the country where there is huge growth ambitions. So to ensure new developments are managing their surface water properly, LLFAs will provide comments on major planning applications, and we also try to work with developers who are seeking advice ahead of submitting a planning application to provide us with the opportunity to input into the design of that site. But when flooding does inevitably happen, an LLFA is duty-bound to investigate the flooding when it meets certain criteria. These criteria differ slightly from council to council, but irrespective, the results of that investigation have to be published on the website so that members of the public can see what has been done. And sometimes those investigations might lead to some enforcement work, as was the case in a lot of places back in December 2020. And that might be because we discover that somebody's made an unauthorised change to watercourse, Or it might be that they've not been maintaining that watercourse properly, and that's led to a blockage. And last but not least, we work with communities who have established flood groups and flood plans, and those who are interested in developing flood plans. And we hold awareness raising sessions such as this conference today and other online ones that we've held in the past. So the Highway Authority, which also sits within a council, also has some drainage responsibilities, but these are related primarily to flooding of roads and pavements rather than the flooding of the properties. And then finally, another department, which I mentioned, often less well known but equally important, is the emergency planning team, who works to ensure that services can continue in the event of a major emergency such as flooding. So if an emergency required the evacuation of a building, it's this team that can organise it for the temporary accommodation, and they can provide information and advice to residents throughout that emergency. So what does everybody else do apart from the council? So as well as the council, there are many other organisations and groups that are involved in flooding, some of which are included on the screen above, and I'm sorry if I haven't included everybody. But in your bags there is a leaflet called Roles and Responsibilities for Flood Risk Management Authorities, and this details what each of those organisations does. But I think the key thing to note is that for flood risk management to be effective, each of these organisations and groups needs to work together to manage that risk holistically. One of the key groups on here is the community flood groups, and that's why a lot of you are here today, and that's because you are key members of your community who want to try and help. So we thank you for being here. So on to the agenda for today. We'll be having 3 presentations this morning, followed by a lunch break, which I mentioned around 12:45. During the lunch break, the Floodmobile will be open outside and will remain open for the rest of the day, so please do visit the Floodmobile if you haven't done already. This afternoon there will be 2 workshops to choose from that will be running at the same time. We've got Workshop A, which will be hosted by the National Flood Forum, which will be looking at flooding and insurance. And then we've got Workshop B, hosted by New Ground and Flood Hub, which will be looking at developing community flood plans and flood groups. So these workshops will take place in this room, so you'll see a bit of furniture moving over the lunch break. There's no need to sign up necessarily to either one, but please just take your seat whichever you fancy. And we'll be drawing the conference to a close at around 3:30. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mary Donau, OBE, to the stage to talk about property level protection.